Hello and welcome to another episode of Quarantine with Fulbrighters, where we bring you some of the best minds in the country to have a conversation with this mind. I don't know why me, but it is what it is. And we have somebody who's an associate professor at LUMS and has done his Fulbright from the Florida State University, and is going to talk about a subject that I'm interested in, but I have not a lot of knowledge of. Hopefully, a lot of you will also learn from him today. So, Dr. Kashif Zaheer Malik, how are you doing, sir?
Thank you very much, Shazad, for inviting me, and I'm doing very well. What about you?
Good, sir. Good. So, what is microfinance? Is it just little money?
Yeah, so microfinance is generally giving loans of smaller amounts. So generally, commercial banks, which generally lend money by taking the collateral from the borrowers. But for microfinance, I mean, if you really want to understand in terms of Pakistan context, so we are talking about loan amount starting from 10,000 to up to say 200,000. And generally, microfinance institutions does not require collateral. So there are different types of fundings. It is for business, mostly for businesses, and they give it for 1 year. And there are two types of microfinance in business. One is the conventional one where they charge some interest, and then there are other Islamic-based microfinance, which generally do qarz hasan, or they lend on interest free. But then there are now other risk-sharing products coming in, and some of the leading microfinance institutions, such as the National Rural Support Program,
Mm.
Kashf, Akhuwat, they are doing it.
So I think a lot of people were talking about microfinance, especially when I was growing up and taking some economics courses. There was a lot of discussion around Malaysia and Bangladesh. I believe the person Mohammed Yunus also won
Yes, it
something.
was.
So there was a lot
Yeah,
of
so
discussion about that. That's the model we need to import in Pakistan for us to achieve economic prosperity.
right. So it was Grameen Bank. I mean, the famous bank, and Mohammed Yunus was behind it, and he also got Nobel
Mm.
Prize for this research. But there has been a little issues with that conventional sort of microfinance, which is interest based, because the interest rate was very high, and there has been a lot of research done by some of the leading micro development economists sitting in MIT and other places. And what they found is that the microfinance itself is very important, because access to finance is not going to be given by the commercial banks to the poor people. But the expectations with the microfinance were too high. I mean, they thought that the poverty will alleviate. So what one of the research found is that it reduced poverty by only 70%. However, when people are cash starved and you give them money, they try to fix one of their economic variables. It could be consumption, it could be health, it could be education. It all depends. So I've been working in this area for the last, say, 7 years now. And when this research started coming in, we made a different hypothesis. And what we thought is that microfinance itself is very important, because there's no other way you are going to give money to the poor people. But you need to come up with a different contract, or maybe you need to introduce some risk sharing products. Maybe you want to give them some flexibility in the contract. So by flexibility, what I mean is that you don't give them, say, 50,000, and at the end of the month you reach to them and say, okay, give us the first installment.
Mm.
So, so based on this, we developed our hypothesis that, okay, why not try risk sharing products, where microfinance institution uh, sort of get in with the client, and they share the risk of business. So in this way, both skins are involved. And this model would really be, would work in the sense that since both have their skins involved, they would really look after business. And there's a possibility that there could be a lot of growth of micro enterprises. And these micro enterprises are really important for countries like Pakistan, where you know that the poverty rates are very high and people don't have access to finance as such, and you know they don't get money from commercial banks for their businesses.
So, I'm going to get towards COVID and the pandemic because a lot of your research currently that I want to talk about is about COVID as well. But as a layman, if I'm looking at this and I'm looking at poverty elevation, a lot of the discussion has been around whether it be the INSAF program or the Benazir Income Support Group or around the world about stimulus checks. How much should the stimulus checks be? Why is microfinancing or is microfinancing through banks, which would be money that people would need to pay back, is that better than direct cash injections by the state?
I I think that we need to differentiate between these two things. BISP generally pays money for consumption, and BISP is a BISP, I mean, Basic
Hmm.
Income Support Program, or for that matter, a SaaS program. They target the ultra poor.
Okay.
The difference between them and microfinance institution is that MFIs are not targeting the ultra poor who needs money for consumption. They are probably one or two step ahead of them. So what they need is they don't have money to invest in their micro enterprise. So
Okay.
microfinance is for the people who are not ultra poor, who are either poor or who are even one step above the ladder. So that is the difference between these two. Now, uh, for as far as the consumption-based transfers are concerned, BISP has been a success in Pakistan, and there's an empirical evidence to that, right? And similarly, EHSAS was also a good program. And actually, we are probably going to evaluate EHSAS program with the team of
Hmm.
World Bank. I forgot her name, Dr. Leopra something. She heads the microfinance. She's the lead of microfinance in World Bank. So probably we'll evaluate this
So when you say
EHSAS program.
micro enterprises, do you mean small shops and small businesses, like really, really small
Yeah, these are
businesses?
very small businesses. So you have small and medium-sized enterprises.
Yeah.
Right. So SMEs are different. They are probably so an SME can have an employee is starting from 5 to 200, right?
Okay.
So we are talking about micro enterprise, which hardly employ any other person,
Okay.
right? But there are possibilities where some businesses need some capital to invest, and they borrow money into their so they borrow money from the microfinance institution to invest in their existing business. So you might see that there are more than one employee working there, right? But
Hmm.
generally, when we talk about micro enterprises, these are very small businesses. I mean, it could start from a cart to a small vegetable shop to a small coca, and I mean there are probably hundreds of businesses.
So COVID has possibly had one of the biggest impacts on these low income households. So what does the research show in terms of the impact COVID has had?
Right. So, I mean, as I told you, I've been working in the area of microfinance for the last 7 years, and when this COVID happened, we really got worried. A reason being that the cycle of the MFIs is such that they collect the installments from the borrowers, and then they reinvest or re-inject the same money into the cycle. So think about it. If borrowers cannot pay back their installments, this whole cycle will disrupt, right? So one of the major challenges which we thought, I mean, and that's why we wanted to have this quick research that how COVID-19 affected the borrowers, the microfinance institutions, and also the employees of microfinance institutions. So our main research question was that we haven't seen such a crisis in MFIs before, or is it going to be an existential, crisis where the MFIs would cease to exist if it prolongs? Like, think about it. If people won't able to pay 6 months installment, I mean, generally a loan has a time of 1 year only. So if 6 months are gone, MFIs would be in big trouble. I mean, the microfinance banks could still survive, reason being that they take deposits. But microfinance institutions, they are either charity based or they borrowed money from some other institution. So that's why, if you recall, State Bank of Pakistan has jumped in, because State Bank regulates microfinance banks, and then MFIs are regulated by the SECP. So both have actually jumped in, and they asked the MFIs and MFBs both that they should give moratorium. They should stop collecting the installments for some time. And thanks God that this did not prolong, like the lockdown did not prolong. It was sort of a temporary shock, which existed for 2 to 3 months, and that's why a lot of MFIs have survived. Interestingly, I mean, if you had a look at our paper, uh, that shows a very grim picture. Reason being
Mm.
that the data was collected right in the middle of the pandemic. It was March 2020. So that's why we saw that, incomes have gone down. People couldn't able to afford their food. Like, one of the biggest concern is that how would we eat?
Yeah.
And yeah, but Alhamdulillah, I mean, that shock was temporary, and the lockdown wasn't prolonged for more than, say, 2 to 3 months, and the MFIs got back into the business.
So the economy is very political discussion in Pakistan. Depending on who you ask and what political party they're from, they will show you either the most grim picture about the economy or the most rosy one. Where do you see it in terms of the impact COVID has had? Do you see our economy recovering? Do you think it's on the right path, or do you think we will continue feeling the long-term effects of COVID on the economy?
I mean, you see, if we really see the pre-COVID time, demand has contracted, and the macroeconomic variables weren't really good, and then it was hit by a COVID shock, right?
Mhm.
But now economy is coming back, and trying to, the economic activity has increased, but it will take some time. I mean, reason being that inflation is still very high, and the bad part is that food inflation is very high, which really affects the poor people. Um, so it will take some time. I mean, because the projections of GDP growth is around 1.5%, which is again negligible. So every year, if we assume that, say, 7 to 8 million new people are coming to find job, our economy needs to grow at the rate of 7% at least to produce enough jobs for them. So yes, it's very challenging, and there are some structural problems in our economy, right? The dual deficit. One is the budget deficit, and for that we borrow a lot from the, from a lot locally,
International.
and then we have the external sort of deficit, or balance of payment deficits, and for that we have to go to IMF. And IMF is a bank, right? So when they give you loan, they come with their conditions, and it becomes very difficult for any government to really, come up with pro-poor policies or popular policies. It's difficult situation for everyone.
Is there a desire for those though? Because I feel like there's not just a lack of desire, it's also a lack of will at times. Because the buzzword these days is elite capture, but nobody's actually doing anything to prevent elite capture.
Yeah, now you're getting into political economy. Now that's for some it's a no go area. Yes, that is very much true. But you need to come up with innovative ideas. I mean, one of the mistakes which this government has done, that they just joined and they thought that everybody is a thief in Pakistan. Well, that was not the case. Like, if say the prime minister says only 3 million pay taxes, that's a wrong statement. We
Mm.
collect almost 62 to 63% of our tax from indirect means, which means a guy whose income is 16,000 per month, he buys soaps from the market, he pays sales tax, right? And that, of course, contribute to that. So you need to, so you have seen that in terms of, collecting taxes, what we have done, we go after one sector, and then there are trade unions, and then they have links in the power corridors, and then, the government gets back. I mean, if you recall I mean, again, I've been, I'm really careful here, but an FBR chairman, was brought in from private sector and a lot of expectations around it. We need to understand our realities. Like for instance, with IT intervention, you can do wonders. And Punjab Revenue Authority, they have installed, just to give you an example, they have installed restaurant information systems, right? And then they encourage the customers to get the official receipt. So the time they punch in, this record is shared with the PRA. And they encouraged customers that, okay, if you do this, then you can take a picture and send it on the WhatsApp, and we'll give you prices on that. So they massively increase their collection. So we need to come up with innovative ideas instead of just choking the economy. And that was a big mistake. You need to actually, the bigger the cake would be, more income, more employment, and more taxes,
So,
right? If the income is going down, how would you collect a massive tax?
mm, I mean, beyond the politics of it, regardless of whichever political party or political system is in place, how do we ensure that a big portion of the cake, however big it is, actually reaches people who might need it a lot more, whether it be through direct cash injections or whether it be through microfinancing? Because even banks, I'm a little skeptical of banks, right? At the end of the day, they're capitalist institutions looking to make money. So we've seen how these systems have hurt poor people and low income communities in the US, where they fall into the debt trap. So financing or lending money is not done out of an interest in poverty alleviation, it's done out of capitalistic interest. So, how do we ensure, or do you feel microfinancing is a way to ensure that a lot more money circulates in the economy itself?
Again, if you compare the overall contribution of microfinance in the overall economy, that looks very small, to
Hmm.
be honest. But at the same time, you need to see how good it has been, doing for the last few years. Microfinance institutions have grown. And this is particularly important because government doesn't have money. I mean, you see, we were cutting our development expenditure to, make different payments. Things are that sort of bad.
Hmm.
So you need to, so for instance, Ahud has a charity model. A lot of people pay money, and then they lend money. Their portfolio has crossed 100 billion, right? Similarly, NRSP is a big institution. Kashif is doing very good. They lend generally to female borrowers, and there are a number of institutions. I don't remember even their names. So yes, they are doing, and of course, there'll be some one there which is making money. That is true. But I think the bigger chunk, which I see, the leading microfinance institutions are not doing that. Like for instance, if we take NRSP, if they say, just giving you an example, I'm not officially quoting the numbers. So if they get the loan for 12%, so the maximum, charge 20%, and they also cover their operational cost in it, right? So they also, they're clear about this, that what we need to do. Our main aim is to bring people out of the poverty trap,
Hmm.
right? And for that, as I told you, that our main research agenda is to test different risk sharing products. And that's where, the microfinance institutions and the clients both will benefit. We are doing that,
What would be some
experimenting there.
examples of risk sharing products?
Okay, so generally, it could be two types of financing. One is where you share capital
Hmm.
and then you do business. So the microfinance institution share capital, they have some equity and the client has some equity. And they decide, okay, we'll divide profit and loss both in this ratio, and we do business, right? And of course, the person will buy back the business. Client will also, buy the equity from the microfinance institution. The second option is that a client has a skill. He could be a barber, right, or anyone else, but he doesn't have money. So in that case, the skill would come from the client, and the money would come from the microfinance institution. And so And client, of course, will share profits and buy equity of business as well over time.
Do you also feel like, in terms of education, I feel that, at least from a layman from the outside, I feel there is some debt aversion in Pakistan, whether it comes from religious grounds or whether it just comes from fear of debt. Is there also a need to educate people about what debt is and how debt could work for them? Because generally, I feel from the outside, it may not be true, research may not show that. Generally, from the outside, I feel Pakistanis, especially low income Pakistanis, tend to be debt averse.
Yeah, that is true, and that is, of course, religiously. I mean, they understand this. But issue is that when the need comes in, a lot of people need to borrow money, and you see the informal market is, I mean, they charge interest from 50% to 100%. That's the normal rate.
Yeah.
So that's where the conventional microfinance institutions come. Okay, say that the informal market is giving you for this percent, we are giving you a 30%,
Yeah. And we
right?
might not murder you if you don't pay us back.
Yeah, I mean, but they have stringent sort of criteria. They come after you. They come after you. So generally, it's social collateral which they use. I mean, if nothing, they will at least come into your locality and start telling people, okay, this guy is not paying us back.
So how do we educate people that debt may work for you?
I mean, again, I don't have numbers, Shazad, on my mind. I mean, but what I see is that there's still a great potential that people. This, I think, I mean, probably they have passed this hurdle.
Hmm.
I mean, those who are more risk averse, I mean, they probably go to Islamic finance. They would think that, okay, one, that they will not charge interest, and second, they are still, religiously driven, so they will not come after us, and so it could be possible, but I don't have numbers. But I know that uh, still there's a great potential. Like we can easily add 50 million, 60 million people to microfinance.
Hopefully you managed to do that. So you're also teaching at LUMS. How has that been like during COVID?
Uh, to be honest, I mean, online teaching, there are some benefits and then there are some issues, especially in testing. And in November, I got COVID. And during COVID, it was a bit challenging. I was quarantined for 2 weeks, but students were patient with me. I mean, but I personally like, to be honest, physical interaction. I mean, I don't really get that feel of a class, while teaching, but there are benefits as well, like when you can record lecture, the students can get anytime to the website or to the recorded lecture, and they can you know see it on their computers, so there are benefits. But tests were really challenging. I mean, it was hard for them to adopt and for us to adopt as well, but there were issues there.
Do you have a take on the online exams controversy?
I mean, LUMS is different. So students are protesting open the institution,
Yeah.
right? The rest of the students are protesting. We want to give online examination, and you know very well what's the reason.
But I mean, honestly, it's also ironic that where they're protesting, the campuses had online classes, but they want to do the exams on campus. So, especially, I mean, an institution like LUMS, where students from all over Pakistan come, it's not that easy. Or an institution like GK, it's not that easy to fly in just to give an exam. So I get the student perspective absolutely 100%. I will always support students
Right.
over institutions.
I mean, again, I mean, you can argue on both sides,
So let's
but
let's
there's a lot of
come
concerns.
let's considering the year we've had, even if some people score better uh, through not the fairest of means, the same people would do the same thing in person. Let's be honest. There is a lot of cheating in person exams. everywhere, and
Yeah.
in terms of papers, people writing for other people. So let's not pretend this is something new, that cheating would be introduced for the first time ever if online exams exist. Let's go back to when you were a student, sir. How was the Fulbright experience in Florida?
I was excellent. I spent almost 5 years there, and it was an excellent experience. I mean, in terms of interacting there with my colleagues at the department, with the community in general. Yeah, I'm here now. I was
How do you feel?
trained as an economist, and
Mm.
I'm using that in
How
my
do you
professional
feel
life.
everything that you learned there has educated your work, or how have you been able to bring back that knowledge and apply it to Pakistan?
Yeah, so uh, we don't really offer good PhDs here. I mean, the quality of research and the coursework and the professors, or generally the academic sort of support you get, or the environment you get, where you are intellectually charged and you're intellectually challenged. That's where you really, groom and you learn, and then you bring that back here in Pakistan. So it's excellent.
So, what do you think some of the things that are lacking, or some things that PhD programs in Pakistan should focus on?
Generally, you see, those who do their PhDs abroad. I mean, Pakistani market doesn't offer them much, and especially after the dollar depreciation. A lot of people actually left LUMS. I mean, they can do okay. I mean, it's fine that it's Pakistan, it's a country, but we have to
Mm.
live as well. So that is one of the reasons we don't have enough, PhD faculty here who can offer a quality PhD program. I mean, in terms of resources, now everything is online. That's not the case. But having good human resource, I think, is one of the biggest challenges.
Absolutely, I think, and we're glad that we have somebody like you at LUMS who's still sticking by despite the dollar depreciation and doing such phenomenal work. I do agree that we need to focus on low income households, even if we not may not have the most altruistic desires for poverty alleviation. Even in terms of the cake example that you gave, the only way we will all have a bigger cake is everybody's making money. We can't just keep skimming off the icing at the top and assume uh, that is how to live. So thank you, sir, for joining us and explaining all these things to
Most
us. More
welcome.
power to you. And hopefully we will be back again next week with another Fulbrighter with their story to share. So thank you very much for listening.
Okay.
This was another
Thanks a lot,
episode of
Siddharth.
Quarantine with Fulbrighters. Thank you, sir. Take care.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.